morning. Thank you for coming to the GRC track. I'm excited you're all interested in learning about risk. Before we get started, I wanted to say thank you to B-Sides for having me, and a very big thank you to my dad who flew all the way from Jersey just to see me talk. He's a vice president of technology at Prudential, and he's been there for over 30 years now. So he's my biggest supporter. I'm super excited. So today we're going to be talking about NIST risk management framework, and I'm going to be talking about how to tailor the framework so that you can implement the controls into your own organization. So a little bit about me. Again, I am a cybersecurity manager, and I focus on governance, risk, and compliance. I've been in the industry for about 5 years now. I did start in a criminology, criminal justice background. I went to the University of Tampa, and then I recently got my master's degree in information technology management. And I have experience developing risk management programs within a variety of industries, including healthcare. That's my main focus. And then I've also been again in government. I've been in finance and gas and oil as well. And of course, I have to mention I'm the founder and CEO of Tampa Bay Techies. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We have a table outside if you want to go talk to us. And our mission is to close the opportunity gap in the Tampa Bay technology industry. So, today, we're going to be talking about some of the objectives of implementing a NIST risk management framework, a little introduction on risk management frameworks as a whole, as well as an organization-wide risk management approach, and then we're going to walk through some of the steps and talk about the inputs, the outputs, and some of the tasks that are associated with each step, and then we'll have some time for questions.
Don't cut it off, give me a little more breathing room.
So, for this presentation, you guys, I'm going to be talking about developing a risk management program based on the NIST risk management framework, and also tailoring and implementing the risk management framework steps within an organization's environment. So to start off, a little scenario. So my boss calls me up. It's my boss. I don't know if he's that happy, but and he says, "Hey Sam, I'm building out a cybersecurity program, but I don't know where to start. I don't know where to put my resources. I don't know, how exactly to implement certain controls. We're a medium-sized SaaS-based healthcare management platform company based out of Florida. So, when you hear healthcare, the first thing I think is PHI. And again, he is asking me how to prioritize security efforts and to build out a security risk management program. And when I hear about risk management program, the first thing that comes to my mind is building out a risk management program by a framework, and this will later be incorporated into the overall risk management program plan. So from there, I pick which risk management framework. I just always go with NIST because NIST was created for federal environments, and so it's a lot easier to tailor those controls since they are very robust. And again, risk management frameworks are guidelines and principles of which an organization adheres to effectively manage risk. And it provides leadership with visibility and transparency into the life cycle of risk management within the organization. And we know in security that, risks and information systems are easier to manage when there's more transparency and visibility. So some key features of all risk management frameworks, we have risk identification, assessment, mitigation, monitoring and reporting, and also risk governance. And these are some popular RMFs, and of course today we'll be talking about NIST 837, but there's also ISO, COBIT, and there's a lot of different organizations that have their own risk management frameworks. So specifically with the NIST RMF, for the new version, the new NIST RMF promotes security and privacy capabilities into information systems throughout the SDLC. So what we see in this new risk management framework version of NIST is that it's promoting the risk management framework to be implemented early on in the SDLC, preferably in the development stage. So with the NIST RMF, it's very dynamic and flexible, as I mentioned earlier, and it provides us a repeatable process to assess and mitigate risks. And again, it allows organizations to maintain an awareness on the security posture of the organization, as well as establish accountability and responsibility. As we'll see, the NIST RMF has a lot of focus on roles and responsibilities. And again, it integrates the security and privacy requirements within different processes in the organization. So the NIST RMF introduces a concept of organization-wide risk management. And what this says is that risk management is really an organization-wide effort. There really has to be communication between level 1 and we'll see the level 2 and level 3 as well. So the top level is the organization level, and this is senior management. This is why senior management wants to bring in a risk and a cybersecurity team. What is the mission? What is the business objectives? And what are the goals for bringing in risk management? Why is RMF being implemented? Is it for, for reputation purposes? Is it to make sure that cost effectiveness of controls are being implemented properly? It has to come from the directives of senior management. Moving on to level 2 is the mission and business process level. So that's where I sit. This is really connecting level 1 and level 3, which we'll see as information systems. The mission and business process is really where the risk management framework and risk management program is built out. And this applies to the people that are managing the risk management program, the people that are building it out, the people that are developing it and executing it. And then level 3 is the information system level. So this is where we get into the hands-on control implementation. We'll see this is where the system owners also sit and where they have a high responsibility as well. So again, communication and reporting has to be bidirectional in this entire process within the organization. And from this, we get risk management across all levels. Now, some things to remember here is that level 1 and level 2 planning are essential to executing the entire risk management framework. Decisions at the level 3 and control implementations at the level 3 level just can't be done in isolation. We can't implement a control without having guidance from the directives above. Number 2 is that risk management is an organization-wide effort. So again, we really have to figure out and know what our goals are before we implement the controls. And risk management efforts affect every aspect of the organization. So risk management efforts really have to be communicated to all levels of the organization. So the NIST RMF steps, here we're going to start getting into the little nitty-gritties and details of all the steps. So the first one is prepare, and this is the initiation phase. Then we go to categorize, select, implement, assess, authorize, and monitor. So some things to keep in mind here is that the steps can be carried out in any order. And what you see in the middle is that prepare has an arrow going to every step. And that's because every step does incorporate some form of preparation, right? You can't implement controls, you can't assess the controls or authorize the controls without having some type of preparation, whether it's like a month or 2 months or it's a year-long preparation period. But they can be carried out in any order. They usually start in sequential order, meaning they start in the preparation stage, they go to categorize and go clockwise, but steps can be revisited because of how flexible and dynamic the framework is. Additionally, most organizations start in sequential order, but after they go around once, they usually will go back and revisit some of the steps later on. Each step consists of multiple tasks that we'll get to in a moment. And some of the key areas that you'll see in every single step and every single task that is absolutely critical to prepare is the stakeholder identification. So who's involved in each task and who is responsible for what. The task inputs and outputs. So what documentation, what interviews, what reports are we taking into consider this in this task or this step and what's going to come out? Is it going to be a plan or a policy or a procedure, or is it going to be some other type of maybe risk register or control assessment? And then of course the criteria for measuring task or step success. Why are we implementing this and how are we going to measure that the control is being implemented effectively? So first step, prepare. I am going to warn you guys, this is the longest step. It's pretty robust, so I'll try to keep it a little high level here. So it's actually split up into 2 levels. It's split into the organization level and it's also split into the system level. And this is the only step that's split up like this. And the reason for that is just so the roles and responsibilities can be assigned properly and just for ease of use. So in this step, this is where the essential activities of all levels of the organization prepare. So again, this is my main area. When I'm brought into an organization, this is the step that I focus on the most because it has to do with the planning and preparation of executing the risk management framework. So in this step, we establish a communication between senior leaders and system owners and operators. And this step also promotes common controls and develops control baselines. It reduces the complexity of the IT infrastructure by introducing those common controls and baselines. And it also helps prioritize and allocate resources. So starting at the organization level, these steps are carried out by again, management and the risk team. The first thing that we have to do is identify the roles and responsibilities. So here's where we bring in like a RACI matrix. So, who's responsible and accountable and etc. for each task that has to do with the risk management program. So for instance, who is responsible for conducting the risk assessment? Who's responsible for updating the risk register? Who's responsible for creating and reporting to senior management? From there, then we develop a risk tolerance strategy. This risk tolerance strategy is also implemented and is a part of the risk management plan. And risk tolerance is the degree of risk or uncertainty that's acceptable to the organization. And this has a direct impact on decision making at the strategic level, and it helps inform risk-based decisions. And then this is where we conduct the organization-wide risk assessment. I could do a whole other presentation on organization-wide risk assessment, but this is basically where you can review the organization's previous risk assessments, whether they were performed externally or internally, and then you can perform your own. So when I brought into an organization, I have my own risk management framework that I created based off of other frameworks as well, and this involves interviewing key stakeholders, reviewing policies and procedures, reviewing processes that aren't documented, so informal policies and procedures, and also just get a good feel of what's going on in the business, who's responsible for what systems, and so on. And then we introduce organizationally tailored control baselines. And this is where the NIST 853 controls come in. So these control baselines are the predefined set of controls that can be tailored by the organization to be applicable to the organization. And then the common controls, which are controls that can be inherited by one or more information system. And again, they have to be communicated to information system owners because they're going to be the ones that are implementing the actual common controls. A good example of a common control is identity and access management controls. So if you bring in a new information system and it's of like high sensitivity, you have the common controls that information system can inherit. And then continuous monitoring, including reporting requirements. So organization-wide, right, that's what we're focused on here, is the organization level. What is our continuous monitoring strategy as far as updating the risk assessments, updating the risk policies and procedures, updating the risk management plan, and updating the risk acceptance and risk tolerance of the organization. Now moving on to the system level. This is performed by system owners, and it gets a little bit more technical here because again, we're focused on the system, not the organization as a whole. So the first thing that we have to do is identify the mission or business focus of the system. So what is that system meant to do, and where does it sit? What is it intended for? Does it hold, PHI? Does it transmit PHI, or does it store PHI at all? Identifying the system stakeholders, so who's in charge of maintaining, operating, even disposing of the system, and then identifying the assets that need to be protected. We have tangible and non-tangible assets, right? And this could be this could be from senior management as far as cost. It could be because of the different data that the system holds. And it's based on stakeholder concerns and also, again, the context of which the information system is used. And then we have to establish authorization boundaries. So this is the scope of protection that the organization agrees to protect. And this establishes accountability, especially when you're working with external stakeholders where there's contracts and agreements in place. You really have to set in stone what they're responsible for and what you're responsible for as far as security, updates to controls, and this could all be drawn out in like an SLA or an MSA as well. And then we also have to take into account information types. Again, is there PHI, is there PII, sensitive data, and also the life cycle of this information. What is the system doing to this data, if any of it? And this is where we can take in data flow diagrams as well. So really seeing where the data travels from start to finish within the system. Continuing on with the system, we have to do a system level risk assessment now. So the assets are prioritized based on the adverse impact or consequence of asset loss. So a lot of times with the system level risk assessments, this is where you'll see a quantitative risk assessment come in since we're dealing with a lot more members. And then from there we come up with the requirements definition. And the requirements definition is an outline of what's required for the security and privacy of the information system, especially when it comes with sensitive information, and we have laws and we have regulations. For example, speaking of a healthcare information system, we have to abide to HIPAA, right? So we have to make those requirements and make sure they align with those laws and regulations, as well as the mission and the business objective of the organization. And this is also where we see that balance of security and operations, right? This is where we kind of have to take a step back and say, okay, am I putting too much focus on controls that may hinder the operations of what this information system is intended for? So with the requirements definition, we can also look at the enterprise architecture. And this, again, provides visibility and transparency. This is where we see the placement of the system within the enterprise architecture of the organization. We can see what it's connected to, again, where the data flows. And we also can start looking at where we will allocate those requirements that we created before, where these controls will be implemented. And also, this will help control the resources and reduce the redundancy of control implementations. And then we have to register the system with the organization, meaning we tell senior leadership, we have a system where we have a new process for implementing systems, and we just tell them the plan. So going back to my boss, he wants to know like the progress of implementing this RMF or building out a risk management program. And I prepared at the organization level. I've talked to the key stakeholders. I've created the RACI chart. I've created the risk tolerance strategy in my risk management plan. And I've completed the organization-wide risk assessment. And this is the entire package that I'm going to be handing to my boss at this point in the RMF implementation. So this includes the risk register, again, the interviews with key stakeholders, the review of organizational policies and procedures, and familiarization with business assets and processes. So that would be a part of a reporting package that I would give. And then I also would give common controls and control baselines. This would be in the form of like a controls catalog. So with the controls catalog, what I do is take like the NIST 853 controls or whatever control catalog you're using, and then have another section for how we're going to be implementing it in our environment, and also how it has been tailored to fit our environment and why. And then also the continuous monitoring and reporting strategy of the risk management program. So how often will we be doing the reassessments? How often will we be doing external audits? How often I will be completing an internal risk assessment, and etc. And then for the system level, what I have created already, so we know that the healthcare management platform is a crown jewel here, right? So that's the system we're really going to focus on protecting. So I've already identified the key system stakeholders, so the people that operate the system, right? The people that make decisions for the system, the people that don't touch the system directly, but maybe work with another system that system touches. I know the data flow, the data lifecycle, the requirements, we've set the boundaries, and we also know where the controls are going to be implemented. And this is where I also start to bring on on the GRC tools. So tools that will help with implementing the controls based on the framework that you've built out, or based on the other frameworks like NIST, RMF, or ISO 3100. And this can also help with your other GRC activities, such as if you're going through an audit, or if you're doing if you're doing internal audit too. So like external and internal assessments. Moving on to the next step is categorize. So these activities are performed by system owners and management, and the purpose of this step is to inform the organizational risk management processes and tasks by determining the adverse impact to the organization. So the first thing that we do here is we draw out a system description. So we know that the system exists, and we know that it's important, and we know that it has some type of data in it, right? So now we need to get into the details of the system. So like, who is the vendor of the system? What other parts are on the system? Where does the system sit? Is it in the cloud? Is it on-prem? And then we have to develop security categorization impact levels. So we're talking about low, medium, high impact levels. So since it's our crown jewel, this has a high impact level. If that thing goes down, like our whole business is down. So with this will help us assign controls and also develop common controls and control baselines for any future systems that may come in with a high criticality level as well. And again, to develop these impact levels, we use the results of the system level risk assessment. Again, helps with the selection of security controls, and then the categorization that we created is reviewed and approved by senior management. Next step is select. So we're going to be now selecting the controls from NIST 853. And again, we have to select, tailor, and document the controls. And that's a super important step that everyone misses, so is documenting the controls. We have to remember that when we're implementing the controls, to document the steps that we take, because that's going to be the same way that the next person is going to be implementing them, and that's how you create a standard and procedures for the organization. So, of course, the first step is control selection. So this is a well-defined set of security and privacy requirements using a lifecycle-based systems engineering process, and this guides the selection of controls. So we have two types of controls. We have baseline controls, and we have organization-generated controls. The baseline controls are from NIST 853 and from other catalogs like that. They are the already predefined set of controls that you can tailor to your organization. Now, the organization-generated controls are a different approach. It's a bottom-up approach, and why would you use that? You would use that for highly specialized or systems that have systems that have a limited scope, where the controls may not be inherited by other systems. And then we do the control tailoring. So this is where we develop the common controls and baselines, and then we have to consider the scope for the rest of the controls and the rest of the controls that are being tailored. And then we can also develop some compensating controls and the rationale for tailoring. There are some times where you think you're going to implement some controls, and I'll get to this in a little bit, but you think you're going to implement some controls, or that a system might inherit certain controls, and you get there and it's this doesn't really meet the privacy and security requirements that this information system requires. So you have to supplement them with some additional controls. A lot of times they're technical controls, and you can also bring in some compensating controls instead as well. And then we have to allocate the controls, right? So there's three different types of controls that NIST RMF kind of points out. There's the system-specific controls, there's the hybrid controls, and then there's the common controls. Common controls, we know, can be inherited by different systems. Then we have the system-specific controls. So those would be the ones that are organizationally created, the ones that are bottom-up, so the ones that are only specific to the system. And then hybrid controls. So these are partially inherited by some systems in the organization. And then we have to document the plan control implementations, and this is done in the security and privacy plan. And this is where we really write out the intended application of the controls, and this way we have it documented again for future use, and it just helps with consistency of implementing these controls. Again, we have to take into account the inputs and outputs, as well as the common controls and the different dependencies that the information system has. And this also helps with the traceability of decisions, right? So documenting the control and really having document change controls, seeing who has modified the documents, can really show also too who has modified the information system itself. And then we have the continuous monitoring strategy at the system level. It has to be consistent with the organization level strategy. If you remember, we developed a organization-wide strategy for continuous monitoring. And now we have to develop one for the system level as well. And based on the impact level and the priority level, the criticality level of this information system, it can vary on the continuous monitoring strategy. For instance, the frequency of reassessments, the frequency of reporting, and also changing the control implementations, and etc. And then plan review and approval. So, going back to the scenario, I've categorized and I documented the system description, so I have all the details of my information system, right? I have a system security plan and a system privacy plan as well. It has all the technical specs as well of the information, and a lot of that has to come from like vendor-specific technical specs, and some come from the system owners as well. And then I've also selected the controls, right? So I've selected the controls in the security and privacy plan, and I've selected the continuous monitoring and reporting strategy. And now it's time to implement the controls. So the implementation is done by the system owner, and we implement the controls in the security and privacy plan and document the specific details of the control implementation. And this is where we can start building out a configuration management plan for this specific system if there's not one already. So the first step here, of course, is the control implementation, and this is consistent with the organization's enterprise architecture. So this would be to use like the risk assessment to perform like a cost-benefit analysis and really see where the implementation of the control should be, because we're going to be bringing in some compensating and supplemental controls. We want to really make sure that the control implementation is sitting on the right spot in the enterprise architecture. And the initial control assessments can be completed in parallel with the SDLC. So what I mean by that is that, going back to what I said before about we think sometimes controls can be inherited by certain information systems, but sometimes we get to implementation and it's not, it doesn't meet the requirements. In the SDLC, especially with like Agile and like the different iterations, you can do the initial control assessments before actually carrying out that phase in the SDLC. It's much more cost effective to implement those compensating controls early on in the SDLC. And then updating the control implementation information in the system and privacy plans. And then we assess the implemented controls. So here we're really assessing for to make sure the controls have been implemented correctly, that they're operating as intended, and that they're producing the desired outcomes, meeting the privacy and security requirements. And this is carried out by the control assessor, the authorizing official, and senior management. So the first thing we do is select a assessor. Anyone gone through SOC 2 audit? Okay, that's fun, right? Yeah, exactly. So the first thing is pick an assessor, right? So we select who's going to be assessing the control implementations. And we want to pick someone that's impartial, so someone that has not had any say or input on the selection of controls. And then we draw out the assessment plan. So how is the assessment going to be conducted? And this is something that maybe the external assessor has. But internally, I'm going to add that into my system and system security and privacy plan so that my senior leadership knows this is how the control assessments are going to be carried out. The plans are developed, reviewed, and approved to assess the implemented controls, and this helps establish level of effort and also expectations for the assessment. So it helps establish the timeline for the assessment, also the roles and responsibilities, also like the inputs and outputs and what to expect from the assessment. The control assessments then are carried out in accordance with the assessment procedures, and then assessment reports are generated. So that fun report that you get to read with the executive summary, with the findings and observations, and then you get to put your initial remediation actions. Right? Sometimes there's a really basic control that you didn't know you might have needed for this assessment or this audit, or you might have not thought about it before, and it's come up for the first time. So those are the initial remediation actions, ones that can be taken care of in like a couple of weeks. And then there's the plan of actions and milestones. So these are based off of the findings and recommendations of the assessment reports. And these are the actions that you will take to correct the deficiencies that were found. And during the continuous monitoring process. And then also this includes the risk assessment. It'll be taken into account so that we can prioritize the risk and the mitigation process. We can tier the controls, and also we can prioritize the risks that will be remediated or that we will address. And then authorize, this is just the senior official authorizing the assessment and the selection, everything of the RMF that we have created already. It's an authorization package that we create that's used by senior management to make risk-based decisions. So it includes the security and privacy plan, it includes the assessment report, the plan of action and milestones, as well as the executive summary. And then the risk analysis and determination. So this is where the senior management authorizing official says, yes, I understand the risks of this information system, the implementation of these controls, and I understand everything that you guys have done here, and let's continue implementing the RMF within the organization. And then we move on to the risk response. So this is the course of action in response to the risk determined. So if we respond to a risk with mitigation, we analyze the authorization package and we determine that we're going to try and mitigate this risk. After the controls are implemented, we reassess the controls and then update the security and privacy plans. Now, if the risk response is accepted, the deficiencies found during the assessment remain documented, and the reports are monitored and changed to the risk factors. As we see, there's a lot of changes that happen within environments, especially in the tech industry. There's changes all the time, new implementations, new migrations. So we have to keep updating these risk management policies and procedures, as well as the risk management plan and program overall, to make sure we take all these changes into account. And then the authorization decision, this is the determination of the common control inheritance. So the authorizing official saying, yes, this information system can inherit this control, as well as the limitations of the system operation once the controls are implemented. And then we have the reporting of the authorization decisions. So going back to the scenario, I've implemented the controls, and then I've also assessed the controls, right? So we have the assessment plan, the control assessment report, the remediations, and the plan of action and milestones. And then we also have the authorization package that's being presented to the authorizing officials. And then we monitor it. So this is performed by almost everyone that's been involved so far. And this is to maintain an ongoing situational awareness about the security and privacy posture of the organization overall, and of course to help the risk-based decisions. So we monitor for system and environment changes. So if a new system's being brought on, or if a system's being disposed of, or if there's a merge, or if there's an acquisition, or if we're migrating to the cloud, or if we're implementing AI, that's a big one right now too. we have to make sure that we have a streamlined and a formal change management and configuration management process. And we also complete ongoing assessments. So these are assessments to the implemented controls and the controls inherited. And we perform the ongoing risk response. So again, the mitigation activities, the acceptance criteria, responding to the risk based on what we created before. And then we update the authorization package. So with the plans, we update it with the modifications to controls. The control assessment reports are the additional control activities that are carried out to determine the control effectiveness. So sometimes the measuring criteria for implementing controls might be a little fuzzy at first until you start to realize what baselines you're really looking for and the deviations from those baselines. And then we have the plan of actions and milestones, which are based off of the progress of the outstanding activities. So this is just, the timeline, the check mark of, yes, we did this, we can continue implementing the framework and continue with the ongoing assessments. And then the security and privacy reporting and the ongoing authorization and determining whether the risk remains acceptable. And then of course we have the system disposal, but that's also a whole other presentation about disposal strategies and information disposal as well. So in conclusion, the documentation developed during the NIST RMF steps become a part of the overall risk management program and plan. And then we learned the 7 steps of the NIST RMF framework and how to tailor them to an organization, as well as the key tasks of the NIST RMF and how to implement them in different environments. Yeah, that's it. We'll do some questions now. This is my contact info. That's my LinkedIn, and then I have some upcoming sessions, and we have some upcoming events if anyone's interested. Again, we have a table with all the vendors, so feel free to come talk to me. Yes?
Typically, how long do these engagements last?
It depends on the size of the company and also the type of data that they hold. So again, if it's like PHI or if it's like government, then typically it'll be much longer. It'll be like a year or so. But sometimes it can be, if it's like very small, like let's say like software company, they can be carried out in a month or 2 months. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Could you talk a little more about risk tolerance and what risks the framework allows for?
Yeah, so risk tolerance, again, is like the degree of what's acceptable to an organization. And so the frameworks don't really specify like a amount per se. It's more so how it aligns to your own organization. So that's something that is created by your organization. So when you establish risk tolerance, you do like the high, medium, low of risk, and we look at like which risk would we still be okay with having in the environment. So like I said, there's no like risk that would be acceptable per se, but it's more so just based on the environment and what management prioritizes. I think yeah. Yeah, so I would look at like GRC tools overall. I really like OneTrust. That's my favorite one because it has a lot of integration capabilities, and also you can really keep track of a lot of your GRC activities there. So also like vendor management. You can do like your own internal like audits and assessments there as well. Any other questions?
What would you say is kind of the key foundational piece in making it successful?
Talking to people. So I always say too that to really, secure a business, you really have to know everything that's going on there. So the first thing that I do whenever I go into an organization is just talk to people. I go in there, I set up meetings with every single department, and I ask them, what are your key tools? Like, what do you use, and who's responsible for it? And I even ask for like a little demo if they can show me like where things sit and what kind of information's in there and who touches what. So really getting to know in and out of the processes, the tools that are in your environment, I think is the key there. Yes.
What are the challenges in the, as far as communication as it relates to developing plans like this, with the C-suite board level? Do you bring that kind of level into your planning process?
Yes, so we have to, and that's where it's really important to get that focus from the C level. So again, as I mentioned, it's an organization-wide approach, and the security, initiatives really have to come from the top level. When it comes to communication issues, yes, I have had communication issues where I've tried to implement something, but it didn't work because no one knew about it. And that's because no one from the top was really talking about, the cybersecurity team is building out this program. So with stuff like that, what I really like to do is tell, my director or my manager and say, I'm having this issue, can we, make this make this more formal. So what I've done in my previous company was I've taken it to like senior management, given a presentation on this is what we're establishing, this is how you guys are going to be involved, and this is how it's going to affect you, and this is like what I need from you to make it easy. So that's why that planning stage is also very important, the preparation stage.
This,